Hi, this is Jon Cohn, author of the novel Slashtag, and you're listening to The Graveyard Show.
Welcome to the Graveyard.
And welcome to another edition of the Graveyard Show podcast. I am your caretaker, and the graveyard is open. Last podcast, I mentioned the 2023 Fangoria Chainsaw Awards, and one of the awards went to Mia Goth, who won Best Lead for her role in Pearl. Now, this isn't the first time Mia Goth's name has come up during awards season. Earlier this year, there was some feeling that she should have received an Oscar nomination for Pearl. Now, recently I came across an article from January of 2023 that was on Collider, and once again it confirms the problem that horror movies come across when being considered quote-unquote legit. Now, this article, which I'm showing you if you're watching this online, talks about how Mia Goth should have been nominated for an Oscar, but like so many times in the past, the horror genre just cannot break through that glass ceiling that exists over it. Now, as you can see here that I've highlighted, and I will read it for those of you listening on the podcast, it has been a growing problem that the Academy has faced criticism for in the past. This year was no different. Now, one of 2022's biggest horror stars, Mia Goth, has recently spoken out about the lack of horror representation at the Oscars. Scrolling down. I think that it's very political, the Pearl star said. She continued, it's not entirely based on the quality of a project per se. There's a lot going on there and a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to nominations. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I think that's true. I think a lot of people know that. Goth would finish off saying, a change is necessary. A shift should take place if they wanted to engage with the wider public. I think it would be of benefit, really, and then in parentheses, to nominate horror movies. And then the article goes on to talk about how she had dual performances in the film X, and it also discusses her 6-minute one-take monologue, the I'm a Star breakdown, and then I don't want to ruin anything else for those that have not seen the film yet. And now there's another link right here that takes us to another article on Collider that says Mia Goth deserved an Oscar nomination for her work in Pearl. And this kind of gets into the meat of the matter, which I really appreciate. It talks about how Goth's Pearl is a character that will live on in the memory of cinephiles for a very long time. Like Kathy Bates' Annie Wilkes and Jack Nicholson's Jack Torrance, Pearl is one of those memorable, complex movie villains over which we will obsess for years to come. And all of that is thanks to Mia Goth's amazing performance. And yet, looking at this year's nominees for the 95th Academy Awards, it's as if Pearl and Goth never existed. The article continues, among this year's many snubs, Viola Davis not getting nominated for The Woman King, Indian blockbuster RRR being restricted to Best Song, etc. One that feels particularly egregious is Mia Goth's absence in the Best Actress in a Leading Role category. With her 3 performances this year, she deserved a prize for her body of work, but if nothing else, she at least deserved to be recognized for her once-in-a-lifetime performance in Pearl. Sadly, her chances of getting an Oscar nod were never that great. The Academy isn't exactly known for its love of horror. Continuing further down the article, there is a headline that says, a long-lasting bias against horror is keeping Goth from getting the statuette. Now, here's some really interesting numbers, so pay attention. Over the course of 95 years, only 19 horror movies have been nominated for an Oscar, most of which in technical categories. In 1974, you had The Exorcist, which took home the award for Best Adapted Screenplay. In 2018, you have Get Out receiving the Best Original Screenplay Oscar. The only horror film to ever win Best Picture was 1991's Silence of the Lambs, which won Picture, Director for Jonathan Demme, Best Actor for Anthony Hopkins, Best Actress for Jodie Foster, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Now here's something crazy. Just 6 horror movies, 6, were ever nominated for Best Picture. We know one of them, Silence of the Lambs. Can you name the other 5? I'll give you a couple more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here are the other 5. The Exorcist, Jaws, Sixth Sense, Black Swan, Get Out. Those 5 joined Silence of the Lambs for the only 6 horror movies ever to be nominated for Best Picture. That is insane. Acting-wise, besides Hopkins and Foster, few horror stars have taken home that golden bald statuette. Frederick March was the first, winning the prize in 1932 for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Kathy Bates won Best Actress for Misery. Natalie Portman won Best Actress for Black Swan. Supporting category, you have Ruth Gordon, who won the Oscar in 1969 for Rosemary's Baby. And they point out recent snubs, 2 incredibly strong performances that I really, really enjoyed. Lupita Nyong'o in Us was fantastic, and of course Toni Collette in Hereditary. I was shocked when both of them were not nominated for Oscars. Now, in fairness to the Academy, it's very easy to point the finger at them and say, it's your fault, okay? Now, I'm speaking for both movies and for television. The reality of the situation is this. When you're a member of the Academy, whether you're voting for movies, voting for television, what happens is come award season, you are just totally inundated with screeners. What I mean by that is that you're getting discs in the mail for movies or for television series, and you're getting a lot of them, even in this day and age of digital. Now, adding to that, all the digital streaming sites that you get. So you'll get emails for individual movies, you'll get emails for studio links to go on and watch anything that they have on there. You get them from the guilds, you get them from the Directors Guild, you get them from Screen Actors Guild, you get them from the Writers Guild, you get them from the Producers Guild. So if you're a member of one or all or some of these different unions, you are getting tons and tons of emails and screeners. You're getting multiple screeners. So if you're a member of the Directors Guild and you're a member of the Screen Actors Guild, you may be getting multiple discs or screeners, screener links to the same movie. So now you have to go through and figure out what you have. You're getting all this stuff, and now you're supposed to sit and watch it. And the reality is that there's not enough hours in the day to see all this stuff. So what happens is that if you're not actively out there promoting your product, it's going to get lost in the shuffle. So it works both ways here. Yes, the Academy needs to open up and they need to start accepting the horror genre for what it is, other than when it's quote unquote legitimate work. And you need to get the studios out there to say, hey, we think that this is worthy. We want to get this out there. Is it worth going through all of this effort and money to send all this stuff out? So you have to consider that as well. So there are a lot of factors here to consider when looking at nominations. It's more than just, well, they're shutting it out because it's from this genre. That is part of it. Yes, that is very true, because there is a bias on horror. But at the same time, if studios really want to be a part of the conversation, then they need to actively be involved as well. Now, this is a much bigger conversation for another time, but I just wanted to point out how the horror genre, even in 2023, is still looking for respect in the world of entertainment. But then again, you know, maybe as horror fans, we're pretty happy in our own universe, and maybe we just don't care about getting respect from anyone outside of it. That's just my 2 cents, and I would love to hear your opinion on this as well. If you're watching this online, please leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think. And if you're listening on the podcast and you want to email the program, you can do so at the following email address, gyspodcast@gmail.com. That's gyspodcast@gmail.com. Always looking forward to your thoughts and comments. As you heard at the top of the show, author Jon Cohn will be joining me in just a moment to talk about his latest book, Slashtag, which is currently available on Amazon in digital and hard copy formats. But before he arrives, here are some quick news and notes. Now, this one's a quick note. Terrifier 3 is coming soon. That's all I have. Deadline reported it a few days ago that Terrifier 3 is in the early embryonic stages of being put together. So there you go. Look, it makes total sense. Terrifier 2 was a massive hit. This movie made a ton of money on a minuscule budget. It got great reviews. Fans loved it. I think Terrifier 2 has now elevated Art the Clown into the iconic horror character stratosphere with Chucky and Myers and Jason and Pinhead and all of them, Freddy. I really think that Terrifier 2 was that sort of moment where Art the Clown became a could-be iconic character to is an iconic horror character. And let's not forget, that movie, folks, clocked into 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours for a horror movie. Now, normally, these movies run anywhere from 75 to 95 minutes on average. Usually 90 is sort of the sweet spot. So for this movie to be 2.5 hours, to be a massive success in theaters, right at the tail end of a pandemic, not only shows you the popularity of this character, but also how good this movie really is. So congratulations again to Damien Leone. I think he really, he made this 2.5 hour movie feel like it was 90 minutes. It really was. And I have to say too, there's always that one massive kill in one of these Terrifier movies that just kind of chills you to the bone. And, of course, Terrifier 2 had that. Terrifier had it, and that still haunts me when I think about that scene. You know the one I'm talking about if you've seen it. So there is a promise, of course, that Terrifier 3 is going to go even farther. So I don't even know if I want to know what that entails. But congratulations to everybody over there. Well done. And can't wait to see what Terrifier 3 has in store for all of us. Well, if you're a fan of the 1986 film Trick or Treat, well, you are going to be very happy to hear this. The film is going to be getting a Blu-ray 4K release from Synapse Films. The upcoming release will be packed with exclusive bonus content from Red Shirt Pictures, and it's going to feature a brand new 4K restoration. Synapse has said that this exciting re-release has been restored in 4K from the original camera negative that brings the horror and heavy metal mayhem to life like never before. In addition to the restored picture and sound, the package will also include exclusive bonus features such as behind-the-scenes content, interviews with cast and crew, and much, much more. No date has been announced yet, but Synapse is looking at releasing Trick or Treat in 2023. Creative AC is adapting their 1980s horror documentary series into an exclusive limited edition coffee table book. That's right, In Search of Darkness, the coffee table book. It's written by renowned horror experts Heather Wixon and Patrick Bromley. The book is going to offer an in-depth look at over 200 films featured in the series. Just like the documentary, the book is going to explore each year of the 1980s, showcasing movies in chronological order. It will also include additional material such as horror icon features, year-in-review pages, box office numbers, and a checklist for fans to mark off the films they've seen. They are committed to providing a definitive tribute to the films that forever changed the face of horror. The limited edition coffee table book will be available for pre-order from now until the end of the summer, and it's going to ship out in early 2024. Mass market editions will be available in the fall of that year, and of course, there's always a special bonus. The first 1,000 pre-orders will get their name in the book and an I Love 1980s horror gift pack. All right, now, my favorite part whenever I talk about these movies, here are the features. The pre-order bonus includes, as I said, your name in the book, an 80s horror stadium cup, TV squishy, bracelet, sticker, an 11 by 17 checklist poster, a chance to receive one of 100 8 by 10 signed photos from horror legends randomly inserted into orders. Now, here are the book details. It's a 10 by 12 glossy hardcover book. Limited edition cover, each copy individually numbered, an in-depth exploration of over 200 films. It's a one-of-a-kind limited edition book. Do not miss this. It's $84.99, and you can find it at 80shorrorbook.com. That's 80shorrorbook.com. Check it out. And if you have not heard any of my interviews with anyone associated with the In Search of Darkness series, well, go back a bunch of tombstones. You're going to find interviews with director David Weiner, producer and the creator of the series, Robin Block, and of course, the men behind the score of all these movies, Jamie Chambers, Don McLennan Jr., known as Weary Pines. And of course, if you're catching this on YouTube, well, just go down to the playlist In Search of Darkness. There's an entire In Search of Darkness wing. And I also have the coffee table book commercial on the Graveyard Show podcast website as well. You can check it out there and see what this looks like. It is fantastic. All right, that's going to do it for news and notes. And as you hear in the background, well, that sound means only one thing. We're adding a new grave to this here graveyard. And when that happens, that means my guest is here and it's time for me to get to work. Joining me now is Jon Cohn, the author of the new book Slashtag, which is available everywhere books are sold. His first book, The Island Mother, debuted at number 3 in U.S. horror on Amazon. And it is a pleasure welcoming Jon to the Graveyard Show podcast. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, it's great having you here. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about your book. But before I get into your latest book, Slashtag, I thought I'd ask you when you first became interested in horror.
Oof. So, I mean, as a kid, I was a 90s kid. I read all the Goosebumps books. I was absolutely obsessed with the Are You Afraid of the Dark? Those kinds of shows that were made for kids in the 90s really hooked me. They grabbed me young. And then I got hooked on watching, like Nightmare on Elm Street and the Jason movies, probably a bit younger than I should have. But, when other kids were getting nightmares, I was getting ideas. So, they had Fangoria magazine back at the time, and I would always go to the store, and I wasn't allowed to buy them, but I would sit there while, my parents were at Barnes & Noble looking at real books, and I'd be going through and, just trying to look up monster movie effects. I just wanted to see the gory stuff. I wanted to look at the monsters back then. And so ever since I was a little kid, I was absolutely fascinated with everything having to do with horror.
Is there a specific type of horror that you enjoy?
I have a soft spot for body horror. I don't know what it is. I just think something about growing weird extra limbs or mutating. I haven't written a book with body horror yet. I think it's coming. But it's, I don't know. I watched, The Fly, early, very young. And I thought, ooh, this is some good stuff.
I was going to say, you must have been a big fan of Cronenberg because that's the wheelhouse right there.
Huge Cronenberg fan. Videodrome was really influential on me young, but even ones that were less body horror but still had a lot of his sort of signature stuff. Scanners was really big for me as a kid. Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember I've told this story in the podcast before, but when I first saw Scanners, it was in the early days of HBO, and because Scanners came out in 80, I think it was 80, and I would have been 10. So I remember my folks had HBO, and it was like that rare time where we had it back in those days. And back in those days, you could you had the lockbox, so they would have the cable feed going into this box. It was like a parental box, so they could turn the key, take the key, and then you couldn't watch HBO when they weren't home. And I'll never forget, we were watching Scanners for the first time, and we didn't know what the movie was about. And when that head blew up, I'll never forget, my mom got up, turned off HBO, locked the lockbox, and took the key. And I'm like, what does it have to do with why am I being punished for that?
What a physical reaction to actually be able to get up and lock a movie. That's such a weird experience. There's everything's so digital now, but to have such a core analog experience of I am literally locking you out of this film.
Right? And these, by the way, are the same people that took me to see Alien in the theaters when it came out. So there you go. There's a little bit of a dichotomy going on there.
That's fair.
So you're the first game designer that I've ever had on the podcast, and it's really a profession that's interested to me, being a fan of board games. So how does one become a game designer, and when did you realize that was a path you wanted to take?
For me, I think a lot of things came together when I finally started committing to writing full time. I still do some board game work on the side. It's mostly commissioned work these days, but I was a kid. I was playing Dungeons and Dragons. I was coming up with my own worlds. I was playing Magic the Gathering in like 6th grade. And all of those things were games that required you to use your imagination. They required you to use kind of analytics. And they were great primers to sort of say, hey, this game isn't locked in. You know, you have your own direction that you can take this if you want to. I remember there was a game, there's a company, Steve Jackson Games. They make all the Munchkin games that like everybody knows about. And there was a game that was called Frag. If it moves, shoot it. And it was supposed to be simulating like a first-person shooter, but in board game form. And they gave you all of these extra cards for guns and weapons that were blank. And I was like, oh my God, I can make my own weapons? And so like my friend and I, we were like crazy creative about, you know, all this weird stuff. And we were like, okay, we're going to create a mercury gun that like shoots mercury bullets that can poison people. And like, we got way too into it, but it, you know, it was one of those things that kind of the bug bit me early. And weirdly enough, you know, the board game stuff really melded into storytelling from an early age. And so it really kind of taught me the fundamentals of writing by creating worlds in Dungeons and Dragons. And basically, in board games, you're kind of creating scaffolding for players to tell their own story. You're saying, okay, here are the parameters, here's the rules, here's the world that you've been dropped in. Now you're going to walk away from this play experience with a story of what happened in the game you played. And when I'm writing books, it's kind of a similar thing where it's like, okay, you start with the foundation, you start with the world building, you start with the characters. And it's just taking it that extra step and then saying, okay, well, now I'm removing the rest of the players and removing their story, and I'm creating my own story now within that world.
So what path did you take then to becoming a game designer? How did you actually get that first job, or what job led you to becoming a game designer?
Sure. So I had been making games just kind of for fun with my friends. Like I said, I'd done a lot of Dungeons and Dragons where I had made my own worlds, and I'd love to make them kind of horror themed because that didn't super exist when I was doing it in high school and in college. And so I'd made some games. I had a game in college that I made that was called like the Mary Curie Challenge, and it was basically a deck of cards, and you were trying to not radiate yourself, give yourself poisoning from nuclear radiation, and it was like silly weird shit like that. But then I had met some people. I was working on some different things, and I got in with IDW when they were working, the comic book company, but they were doing games at the time. And I had somehow managed to work my way into the premiere screening of their TV show Winona Earp, based off of a graphic novel series. And I met their product designer, who ended up becoming my business partner, and he's like my best friend now, and we've been working together for like 10 years. But we had a lot to talk about, and I had just a bunch of ideas from like stupid games I'd created, just thinking like, this is just for me and my friends. This will never see the light of day. But then he was like, well, come on in, let's talk. And from there it was like, I guess this is how you get your foot in the door. It really is networking, right? And so from there, I kind of got bit by the bug, and the progression from there is a lot of heartbreak. I had that first instance where he was like, oh yeah, like we'll put out your game, like you've got this already done, it's cool. And then it was like, all right, what do I do for my next game? Yeah. And it's like, oh, now you need to go to like every convention, and you need to start like cold calling companies and pitching things and having, trying to have 40 meetings in a day where they're all having 40 meetings as well in a day. And they're so exhausted and you're so exhausted, and they're like, all right, what do you have for us now? And you're just like getting your heart broken 40 times a day, trying to get your next game to have somebody to pick it up. I did that for about 4 or 5 years before I had built up enough traction that companies started coming to me and saying, okay, we know, what you're able to do. Do you have any interest in Ghostbusters? And it's like, not only do I have an interest in Ghostbusters, I have a tattoo of Gizmo from Gremlins dressed as a Ghostbuster. And they were like, all right, that's enough qualifications we need. You're hired. Can you make a Ghostbusters game? And so, from there, it sort of snowballed a bit, at least until COVID, when the board game industry sort of collapsed in on itself. And that's when I sort of made the big pivot to full-time writing.
Well, it sounds to me like being a game designer is a lot like either being a filmmaker or a screenwriter, where you're pitching stories to different studios, going, well, here's my script, or here's my film, and they'll either go yay or nay, or we'll call you back at some point and let you know, and never do.
You know what? The third one is the most common, where they're like, yeah, sure, that sounds good. Give me your card. Give me a prototype that cost you $50 to put together that I'm not going to send you back, and we'll maybe get back to you in 6 months, and then they 90% of the time never did. But yeah, it's a grind, just like in the entertainment business. It's a grind.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's never annoying, right? Not hearing back. It's just like, really?
Right.
You guys don't have the decency to tell me at least a no. I mean, just give me something. Now, the games you've designed run across different genres, from Grindhouse to Disney's Sorcerers, Arena Epic Alliances, Munchkin Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You mentioned Ghostbusters. Do you like having that kind of variety when you're designing a game?
I do. So I like working within licenses. It's when you're creating your own game from scratch, it's an infinite, sandbox. You're in the Sahara Desert, and it's like, okay, I can do anything I want. And sometimes you get that kind of a paralysis of like, if I can do anything, I can't think of anything. I really like it when a company comes to me and they're like, okay, are you familiar with this IP? Do you know this license? Do you like this license? Here's what we're looking for. And then I have like the Sahara becomes a sandbox. And it's like, okay, well, I can work within a sandbox. If you're giving me these parameters to work within, I can build you a game that has an MSRP of $40 and has like this level of components and is built to play for 1 hour for this age range. It's like, okay, well, now we've limited this down. We've got this scope that seems clear, and I'm kind of off to the races. And especially if it's a license that I love, that's kind of like that child wish fulfillment happening. When I made the Munchkin Ninja Turtles game, I got to art direct Kevin Wilson, who's the creator of the Ninja Turtles. Wow. And I was like, they were like, okay, so now come up with the art for Kevin to make. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? wait, you're actually going to have the creator of the Ninja Turtles? And like, I brought him this drawing I had done it like when I was like 5 years old that was still hanging on my mom's wall of like Kang. And I was like, I drew this when I was 5. I'm very excited to be a part of this. Wow. So there have been some moments within the board game industry where it's like, oh, wow, all right, my inner child is like patting me on the back right now.
Very cool. I'm assuming, too, that there are certain guidelines that they give you based on whatever IP you're working with, whether it's Disney or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like what can't happen, I would say, just to kind of put it that way. They would say, this is what we want, this is what we don't want, right?
Absolutely. I can kind of talk about this one because it died. It died at the worst possible time. I had this game that I was making. It was a murder mystery game for like up to 30 people. Wow. And it was all Batman villains. Wow. And so it was all Batman villains, and the whole premise was like that the Joker had Batman's identity, and he was doing this auction, and halfway through the night, the Joker gets murdered, and the box goes missing, and everybody's got to figure out who killed the Joker. And I'd been pitching it to this big company, pitching it, and they were like, oh, all right, we like it, we're going to push it to the next, and they went out and asked for Warner Brothers approval, and they said, yes, we love it, but we can't have guns. No guns. Huh. And it's like, okay, all right. They're like, we're moving away from guns in any way, any form. So like originally the Joker had been shot, and it was like, okay, now he's been stabbed. the reason I can talk about this now is that the final stage of that game, when they were like, okay, we're just going to play through it one more time, and then we got the green light. That conversation happened March 12th, 2020. Yeah. And so ever since then, they were like, are you serious? You want to make a board game that has 30 people in a room together? That's never going to happen again. I was like, okay, fair enough. But yeah, there are sometimes some really weird and interesting little things. Disney was really big with that, where I'm still under NDA with Disney of what I can and can't talk about. Yeah. But there were a lot of weird little things where you'd create a card and it'd be a name or a quote from a movie, and they'd say like, well, you can quote a character's quote, but it can't be a quote from a song because we don't have the license ownership of the song because the song was written by someone else. And so you get into like these layers of ownership and licensing that can sometimes get a little frustrating, but like most of the time you're like, all right, well, I guess that makes sense, but it's something I had never considered.
Yeah, it's like that in television. You can't, if you're doing like a talk show or if you're on a show or whatever, game show, and somebody starts singing a commercial song, that's a no-no, because the composers will actually get paid for that. It's considered like being, like if you were playing it on Spotify or something. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting licensing things that I've come across over the years. I was like, oh, I had no idea. Oh, okay, well, you can't do that either. I mean, considering that the Joker uses guns, Harvey Dent uses guns in the comics and the movie, it's very interesting that they didn't want that. But that's too bad. That would have been a game I definitely would have wanted. I'm a big Batman fanatic, so.
And they were like, we definitely want Deadshot in the game. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I forgot about him. Yeah, it's like, wait, the guy who's, that's all he does. How am I supposed to do this exactly?
Yeah, it was an odd one, but yeah, at some point I may just because I have a newsletter and I give out some free short stories, but I also give out some free games when people sign up for my newsletter on my website. And at some point I may just drop that all in there and say, if you want to run it, here's all the stuff. Here's a big PDF. And just have at it, because I put like 8 months into that game. Wow. And I'd love to have somebody else experience it at some point in my life. That
sounds awesome. I know a bunch of people that would get together for that. That is just Oh wow, man. These things happen.
It happens.
So, what was the point in your career where you just sat back and said, okay, it's time to start writing. I want to write books. I believe your first book was a short story book. When did that take place?
So yeah, I was doing games, and I had done this game called Grindhouse, and the first version had come out. And Grindhouse is basically like a choose your own adventure story game, and so it's made up of. And at this point, we've got a second edition coming out in I think September, and I've written something like 250 interactive short stories for this game at this point. And the whole thing is that your characters literally are losing their arms and legs as they go through the rooms. And so like you'll have a room and it'll be like, okay, everybody, we've got like these like steaming hot like burger patties on a grill, and they're like, everyone's got to flip the patties with your hands. So you're like burning off your hands to try to do it, and like players have to volunteer to do it, and you're like, you've got these little arms and legs that you can flip over to injured sides, and then you can remove them all together, and then the art shows that they're missing limbs, and literally that's your points. Like you want to end the game with as many limbs intact as possible. But I had done that, and so that was a lot of writing. It was a lot of short story stuff. And then I had gotten asked to be a part of this short story anthology called Diablo House, and it had a number of really big authors in it. Grady Hendrix had a story in there, and he's huge right now. And so I got to be a part of this anthology, which was really exciting. And that was again right before 2019, 2020-ish, like right before the pandemic hit. And a lot of people, when I say that the board game industry collapsed during the pandemic, people are oftentimes surprised. They're like, well, I thought people would be playing more board games. But the thing is, like, for most games, if you want to play a game with somebody, you got to invite somebody over to play the game. And so like that didn't work. And then it was like, okay. And then all of these games are getting manufactured in China and shipped over here. prices of manufacturing, prices of shipping quintupled. And so like it priced out all of the small guys, and really only the big players were left. And so it was like, okay, I need to do something else. And I had done some writing. I had been writing D&D all my life. And so I thought, now it's time. Grindhouse had done well. I said, it's time to get really serious about this and start writing novels. And so, I started with The Island Mother, it's a folk horror novel that is, it's kind of a thriller folk horror where this woman she's kind of on the run from a meth dealing murderous ex-boyfriend, and she finds a job at this like kind of paradise resort in Hawaii. But then all of this spooky supernatural stuff starts happening all around her. All these bad things are happening, and it's kind of like it's like White Lotus meets Midsummer, where it turns out that she's embroiled herself in supernatural forces beyond her comprehension, and realizes it far too late in the game. And so that was my first novel, and that one came out, and it did pretty well. And then I've got my new one, Slashtag, that just came out. That's been. I am shocked at the reception that Slashtag has had so far. It's been a real wild ride in the last couple months with that one.
Well, I don't want to overlook The Island Mother, because that one, if I'm right here, the Publisher's Weekly Book Life Prize for Best Indie Horror of 2022.
Yes.
So you're hitting a pretty good stride right now. Right out of the gate, that wins an award. That must have been pretty good validation for you for your first book.
It was, I had no idea if, making the transition was gonna go smoothly or not. And, everything, it's so community based, anywhere that you're going, like I said, with board games, like it's all about networking. It's all about getting yourself to know the people in the community and getting them to either promote you or find, a way to work with you. And so I kind of felt like I was starting over when it came to writing. And so being able to go in after the first book, which, your first time doing any outing, you're like, okay, this is when I'm going to learn the ropes. This is when I'm going to make all of the mistakes, and I'm going to, figure out how everything is done properly. And so, it was pretty exciting to win an award like that and say, okay, so, sales were okay. I was trying to figure out how to get, marketing and get my name out there. But being able to say, like, content-wise, quality-wise, hey, this was the best, indie horror of 2022. That was pretty cool. And so, it got me jazzed to really put everything I could into the next one, into Slashtag. Which, now I feel like I'm still learning. I'm still making mistakes. That's the process. You learn, you make mistakes, and then you do it a little bit better the next time. But Slashtag has been a much smoother experience.
Well, I'm wondering too, because you're starting with a blank canvas when you're designing a game. You're starting with a blank canvas when you're writing a story. I'm wondering what the differences are when you're putting these together. I know it might be a general question, but when you're designing a game versus writing a book, what would the greatest challenge be between the two?
Sure. So when you're designing a game, the biggest challenge is that you want the players to walk away having their own story of the experience and have that story be different every time. You want them to be able to say, can you believe what happened at the end of that last game? Can you believe this moment? It's all about building towards these moments, but you don't have control over when those moments happen. All you can do is put all of the pieces there and hope that they fall into place in a certain way that is going to be different every time. When you're writing a book, you have one story. You've got the one story that you're telling, and you want to make sure that one story is the best version of that kind of player's experience is sort of the way that I look at it. I don't necessarily see myself as a writer. I see myself more as a storyteller that uses different mediums, I guess, to find a way to communicate a story. And so that has sort of been the greatest challenge with writing the books is, if I'm running a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, my players are 9 times out of 10 going to do something that's different than what I planned for. I can come up with 10 different ideas of what people will do, and they will always go with the 11th. Always. And so when it's writing a book, I'm like, okay, I'm everyone.
Yeah.
I am all the players. And so it's coming up with, trying to come up with like, well, what would this person do, and trying to get into these characters' heads. And so for me, I know a lot of writers, they want to put the plot first. I very much am a character first person. I like to do all my research ahead of time. I like to do all of my world building ahead of time, all of my character trees ahead of time, so that by the time that it comes to writing the plot, I've already got everything built. I've already have my sandbox that is completely constructed, so that I can kind of let my characters then run free and figure out what is going to happen to them. And so, I have a loose plot outline for my story, but I really like to say, I've got everything lined up. I've got everything ready to go. Now let's see where these characters go. Let's see what they do.
Slashtag was #1 on Amazon for new horror. Congratulations, you're 2 for 2.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was #1 in American horror. It was #1 in classical horror. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it got there. And then it got #1 in horror, science fiction, and fantasy in television, which is, I think, which it still is now, which is because I think it's such a weirdly niche category, because Slashtag takes place as a TV show. It's the basic premise is that there is this reality competition series that is a horror themed reality competition that these 7 celebrities are all competing in, and they have to try to exorcise the ghost of a serial killer that's basically in a super haunted version of H.H. Holmes' Murder Mansion. And so because it was set in Oz as a TV show, I was kind of able to, I guess, have a subcategory within Amazon as television. And I was like, all right, I'll take it.
Sure. Why not? So for anyone that is interested in purchasing your books, tell them where they can go.
Yeah, so it's on Amazon. I have it as a paperback, ebook. It's on Kindle Unlimited if you subscribe to that. It's also on Audible. And I've got an absolutely fantastic narrator. Her name's Lauren Ezzo. I was somehow able to capture her. She did the narration to this book called Dead Silence that came out last year by an author named S.A. Barnes. And if you liked, it's like Event Horizon meets The Shining.
Ooh.
Crazy good book. Like, it was my favorite book I read in 2022. And I was somehow able to nab Lauren as the narrator, and she does an absolutely incredible job. She takes the writing and elevates it to like a completely new level. Yeah, so you can find it on Amazon. And then because I wanted this to be kind of an all kind of inclusive multimedia experience, because it is supposed to be this TV show, it's supposed to be all kind of online, it's all very social media themed. I created a companion website that's in universe called /taginsider.com. And on that website, you've got bios of all the characters. You've got maps of the hotel. Wow. There's a 5-episode podcast that's in universe podcast that takes place throughout the book. And so like the first episode is spoiler free. It's like hey, what do we think is going to happen on the show? And then you've got these other 4 episodes that take place, and the book tells you when to listen to the podcast, or at least the optimal times to listen to the podcast episodes. But it kind of does a deep dive into more if you wanted to get more. Because, again, I love to do the world building. I love to do all of this character stuff. But when you're writing a narrative, you want to make sure that the story is moving. But sometimes people want to dig deeper. Sometimes people want to know about the world building. And so there's things that I'll reference in the book that it's just enough to get you through the story. But if you wanted to know more, you can listen to these podcasts, and they give you that sort of extra layer of immersion.
I love that idea. I think that's so brilliant. I really do. I wonder if that's maybe you're onto something that may be the future for a lot of this. I mean, it's so smart because you are a world builder, and why waste all of that work if you can put it to good use? And I think, you're using all parts of, of the carcass, let's just say. I mean, you really are. You're not wasting any of it.
I even managed to loop Grindhouse back into it. So Grindhouse, the game, is mentioned in universe in the book of Slashtag. And we've got the second edition of Grindhouse coming out again, I think September, October, around there. And I was able to work with the publisher. We have an expansion that is specifically focused around Slashtag. And so it's called Welcome to the Propitious. The Propitious is the name of the hotel, the haunted hotel that everyone's locked in Slashtag. And so there's an entire expansion that goes straight into the book. And so again, it's building off of each other and kind of hoping that I can merge these two worlds of board games and my novels and maybe create something greater than the sum of its parts. At least that's the goal.
Well, it sounds to me like you're really hitting all the marks, and I'm really excited to delve into all of this. Now I just need the time to do it. but I'll make the time. Hey, if anybody wants to follow you online on social media, are you on any of these sites?
Yes. I'm at Jon Cohn Author. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can sign up on my newsletter at joncohnauthor.com. Or you could also sign up through my newsletter at the Slashtag Insider website. So you can find me in all of these places. It's the same name, so it's easy to find. JONCOHN author. So yeah, I'm all over the place.
Well, this is great. I listen. I appreciate you having taking the time to come on the program. This was really fantastic. You have an open door here to come on in whenever you want to pitch or you want to promote any of your next products. I would love to have you back on the program again. Jon,
thank you.
Yeah, listen, thanks so much for being here, and look forward to talking to you again. Good luck with the new book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And as I put this interview to rest, I want to thank Jon for joining me here on the program. It was really nice talking to him. And I really can't wait to read his books because, well, especially with Slashtag, all the different media that you can weave in between podcasts and games and everything else. That's going to be awesome. So check it out. I would love to know your thoughts if you've read the book. And if you happen to be somebody out there that at some point gets this Batman game that he was talking about with me earlier, please let me know. Let me know how it was, because I really wish that game was available. I'm a big board game fanatic. That with Batman, and I'm in. Now, as I begin to close down the Graveyard, I wanted to thank all of you who have subscribed to the Graveyard Show podcast on YouTube. Many more of you have been finding the channel and have been subscribing and commenting on my videos. I want to send out a special thank you to Zodi77 and Joe Hall. Joe left some really nice comments on one of my videos, and Zodi as well. That would be the Catacombs of Horror Count Yorga videos. And Joe's was on the Caretaker Reveals Count Yorga. It's really nice to engage with viewers and listeners of the show. And it just makes me happy to know that you guys are engaging out there. And, if you appreciate it and you let me know, I will get right back to you. And it does mean a lot to me. I do put not a ton of time into these things, but, with Catacombs of Horror, there's a lot of work. Caretaker Reveals, not so much, but it just means a lot to get a little love out there. Sometimes it's a little quiet. You don't know what to think. So to get a little bit of love goes a long, long way. So thank you, Zodi77 and Joe Hall out there in YouTube land. I really do appreciate it. Among many of you, and I do reply, and if you don't believe me, just go check it out. Now, Zodi was asking about the movie Deathmaster. Since I've done Catacombs of Horror on Count Yorga and the Return of Count Yorga, Zodi77 was wondering if I was going to do one on Deathmaster, which was the third vampire movie that Robert Quarry did that has no relation to Count Yorga, but we kind of put it in the Yorga unofficial trilogy, let's just say. And yes, I will be, just not yet. I have Blackula coming up on Catacombs of Horror. And then I think I'm going to veer away from the vampire movies for a little while, because that would make, out of my 5 Catacombs of Horror, 3 of them on vampire movies. So I kind of want to change it up. I have some other ideas for other movies as well. And then I have a major one that I'm working on, which is probably going to take me about a year to put together at least. That I think is going to be really worth it when it's all said and done. But I need some time to really put this one together. So anyway, there you have it. So if you want to get in touch with me, the Caretaker, you can do so quicker on YouTube than you would if you email me. But I do reply, and I do like replies, and I will pin stuff, especially if you correct me, like someone did on the Catacombs for Count Yorga Vampire. And a reminder, if you are a podcast subscriber, you should consider subscribing to the Graveyard Show podcast on YouTube, because I'm devoting a lot more time doing videos for YouTube than I am the podcasts. So, for example, in the last month and a half, I've uploaded quite a bit of programming to YouTube. For me, that's quite a bit. You're talking about the Caretaker Reveals episode on the Amusement Park Blu-ray review, spoiler-free. The Caretaker Reveals Count Yorga Collection Blu-ray review, that's spoiler-free. And then there are the GYS Classics. And then I just started uploading movie trailers as well. So as I get movie trailers for upcoming releases, I am now putting them on the Graveyard Show's YouTube channel as well. You can currently see trailers for the movies Mad Heidi, The Flood, and then the In Search of Darkness commercial for the Coffee Table book, as well as the In Search of Darkness Part 3 flash sale, which is over, but you can still see the commercial for In Search of Darkness Part 3, or the trailer is on there as well. So a lot more of that going up than podcasts. And there's just a ton more stuff on there you can find as well. Old Graveyard Show podcasts, BC's Video Vault, where he did movie reviews from my old Graveyard Show podcast from 9 and 10. Old horror promos from the Horror Podcasting Network, old promos for this show, a bunch of stuff. So you can check that out. The handle is at Graveyard Show Podcast. At Graveyard Show Podcast is where you can find me on YouTube. Look forward to seeing you inside the graveyard on YouTube. That's going to do it for me, my friends. I look forward to seeing you again very soon. And as you exit the graveyard, I would like to remind you to please lock the gate behind you. We wouldn't want anyone to get out. Until next time.